Hello everybody. If you've been linked to this video, it's likely because your fleet is about to go through drifter holes. Drifter holes are very specific, so I'm very quickly going to explain how to use them as a normal fleet member, and then we will go into further depth on how to use drifter wormholes and how to make bounce pings, etc. But this first bit will just be for fleet members on how to use drifter holes. Initially, what's going to happen, you have to be very careful, otherwise you will die, the rats will kill you, and you cannot warp on a drifter hole grid unless you follow these very specific steps. First things first, you're going to go up to your selected item up here in the top right, your warp to within. You're going to right click, hit set default warp to within distance, and you're going to set 88,000 because this is set default warp to distance and it's in meters, not kilometers. So make sure you set 88,000. At which point you're going to go to the bounce ping that your FC is going to tell you to go to. You're going to warp to that at 0. So click and hold, drag up to make sure that you go beyond the 88 and go to 0. You're going to warp to the bounce ping. If you don't follow these specific instructions, you will land on the hole, and if drifter rats spawn, they will scram you and two-shot you unless you're in a very, very tanky ship. As we land on the bounce ping, we're going to make sure we see the wormhole. We're going to right-click the wormhole and click Warp to Within. You can also do the radial menu and just warp to within 88. Immediately as you land on the wormhole, regardless of whether there are rats here or not, you need to take the wormhole. Now that we are inside the wormhole, you're also going to need to warp to a bounce ping and perform the same operation. For sake of the argument, I'm also going to just go back through this wormhole as if I'm exiting a drifter wormhole. So I'm going to go prop on, reapproach the wormhole. I'm now exiting the wormhole. On the outside of drifter wormholes, more rats can spawn. They will likely kill you. So please warp off as soon as you can. As soon as you land on a drifter wormhole, make sure you warp off or do exactly what the FC tells you to do. If you have a cloak, please cloak immediately, or cloak warp trick if you have to. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the rest of how drifter wormholes work. I'm going to try and keep it lightweight, so for those of you that are just looking for how to make a drifter wormhole bookmark, please jump to this timestamp in the video. For those of you that are trying to figure out what drifter wormholes are and you need to use them for travel or for any other activities in the game, you've come to the right place. I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as possible. Drifter wormholes are a randomly spawning highway through Eve that most people don't know how to use properly, because if you use them improperly, you'll probably die. If you use them correctly, though, they can be used to shave hours off of your travel time, even be used for hunting large targets across hard-to-access regions in Eve. There are 5 drifter wormholes in the game that spawn connections randomly throughout the day. They are identified by the first letter of their signature, B, C, R, S, and V. Drifter wormholes can only spawn in Jove observatory systems. The wormholes do not need to be scanned down, and they actually appear directly on your overview when you enter the system. Because of this, the most effective way to find a connection between 2 drifter wormholes is to have one character in each region that you need to get to and from. Then you can just have a quick moving ship to blast through all the nearby Jove observatory systems until you find matching letters. Once you find the matching letters, you can go ahead and make your bookmarks. Once you enter the system, to determine which type it is, you must warp to them. Once you land on the grid, look at the wormhole on your overview and look at the first letter of the wormhole. That'll determine which type it is. Drifter NPCs are gods gifted to us by the divine power of CCP Hilmar himself, and due to their blessed power, they can lock to infinite range. They will scram you, and will two-shot just about anything shy of a brick tank dreadnought, so please handle this stuff with care. Drifter rats always spawn on the outside of the drifter wormhole, but they do not spawn inside the drifter wormhole. It is possible to let the rats spawn, at which point, after an unknown time, they will then reapproach the wormhole and then despawn. For this reason, to go through drifter wormholes, you must be either able to warp cloaked, perform a cloak warp trick, or remain cloaked until the rats despawn. The final option is the least ideal option, and is you can have a friend on grid tell you when there are no more drifter rats on the hole, at which point it is safe to access. You can think of a drifter wormhole as an ESS grid. When you warp to the wormhole, you always land on the beacon. you cannot warp on the drifter wormhole grid. So you can't warp up to the wormhole, you can't warp around to other bookmarks on the grid. It is impossible. CCP's intended purpose was to make you burn all the way from the beacon to the wormhole. However, we have subverted their intentions with a little bit of good mechanics knowledge. Just like an ESS grid, you can warp to the grid at a variable distance. So if we want to land on top of the wormhole, all we have to do is get the warp in angle correct. To do this, we must set up a bounce ping. Here's how we make the bounce ping on the drifter wormhole. First things first, we're going to open the DScan window. We're going to click here, set this range to kilometers. From there, we're going to set the range to 365,000. There we go, 365,000. We're going to set the angle to 15. We are now going to hold the Victor key, as in V as in Victor. We're going to click on the wormhole on our overview. You may have to do it twice. That's going to move our camera to focus solely on the wormhole. At this point, we cannot change our view, otherwise it will mess up what we're doing. Open the solar system map. From here, we're going to hit focus on current location in the top left, and we're going to zoom all the way in. You should see a very small scan window. From there, we're going to open up our probe scan window by hitting Alt-P as in Papa. From here, we're going to hit Launch Pinpoint Formation. We're going to center the formation on our current ship and set the probe size as high as it'll go. From here, hold your Control key, scroll down until all the probes are in your view. Keep going as far as it will go. Release the Control key. Now, hold the Shift key. From here, you can control each probe individually. You can't see all of them because they're all stacked up. You want to stack them all in a line at the very edge of your scan cone, but still inside the scan cone. So we're going to make a line one on top of the other, and you want them to be as dense as possible to increase the likelihood of you getting a probe exactly where you want it. Keep going until there's one probe left. Okay, I've got my probes in a stack now. Get them as neat as I possibly can. I'm going to release Shift. As I release Shift, you'll see that the probes are centered around this one block here. That is showing, if I click Shift and release Shift, it's showing the average position of all the probes. From this point, we want to take our last probe and we want to make it so that our average position of all the probes is directly on top of our ship seen here. So I'm going to keep moving this backwards, release Shift. Perfect. It is now centered directly on our ship. Go over to your probe scan window and hit Save Current Formation. Name it Drifter Hole. Now that our drifter hole ping is made, our formation is made, all you need to do anytime you warp to a hole, click on Drifter Hole in your saved formations, center the formation on your current ship, select 1AU, hit Analyze. This will warp all the probes. As you can see, a bunch of probes have appeared behind the wormhole. They're greater than 10,000 kilometers, which means they're technically off-grid, which allows us to break the ESS mechanic and allows us to warp to them. So we can save location, name it vhole bounce, and we warp directly to the bounce ping. You're just going to choose the scanner that's closest to the wormhole behind it. We're going to select the wormhole. On our selected item tab, right-click, hit Set Default Warp to Within Distance, and remember that this is in meters, not kilometers. So we want to set 87500. This will land you directly on top of the hole. Here we can see it in action. I'm going to hold down my ping, warp to within 88K. As you can see, I landed directly on top of the wormhole. Take the wormhole. This is the most important part of this video. If you learn nothing else, learn this. When you are inside a drifter wormhole, pretend this isn't saved, make sure You right-click the hole before you warp off, or you will never find your way back. Hit save location, in this case, omist. The best part is that drifter hole ping does not need to be taken from the bookmark. You can actually, or from the beacon, I should say, you can actually approach, launch your probes, hit drifter hole, center the formation on our current ship, 1 AU, just like before. Probes will warp off. Now, you just got to figure out which side they're on. So they're on this side. So look at the multiplex forwarder, and then they'll always be on one side. So as you can see, we already have a ping, but in this case, I'll save one just to be as an example. Right click, save location, omist, bounce. From here, I can click. Now look, it says I can warp to within 88. I can just keep dragging out. It doesn't matter what distance I warp to the bounce at. The only thing that matters is that I warp to the wormhole at 87,500 meters. That's going to be all for this tutorial. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to give it a thumbs up, and appreciate you watching.